Welcome to Inner Threads, a podcast on healing, wholeness, growth, and connection. Join us for shared insights and wisdom as we weave together our common stories to help you along your own healing path. Inner Threads is hosted by Jessica Luke, Bert Nelson, and me, Courtney Kaplan. I'm a coach based in Oakland, California, and after years in the corporate world, I founded Iconic Leadership Coaching to help people create a good life, both personally and professionally. My transformative coaching work uses multiple modalities that include emotional, physical, and spiritual tools to help my clients find peace and power.
I'm Bert Nelson. I'm a spiritual counselor and the executive director of a nonprofit conservation farm in Western North Carolina. I'm interested in how spirituality, science, and shamanism come together to help us heal and live more fully as ourselves.
I'm Jessica Luke. I work as a spiritual counselor, and I'm the founder of the Well-Grounded Soul and the 1440 Health Collective, a healing center in Bethesda, Maryland. I support people through times of change, helping them reconnect with their intuition, personal power, and the wisdom of the natural world.
Welcome to Inner Threads. We're excited to be here with our topic today of acknowledging pain. So we know there's a lot going on in the world and there's a lot of pain and suffering, and we wanted to talk a little bit about that and unpack it a little bit. So with that, let's open up with Jessica and Bert and find out, so what's been going on? What inner thread has been most present for you lately?
Hey everyone, Jessica. That's a really great question. We had this big winter storm last night, and it just reminded me, it's reminding me of our body's connection to nature, because we had this huge barometric pressure drop, and did I feel it? And it was a really interesting, it just messed up my sleep. So it was really interesting to see how like our elements that are inside of our body are so connected to the elements of nature that is around us, and that thread that connects us to nature, that is our physical bodies and the energies that we carry within us. So I just didn't get a lot of good sleep last night. So that is the result of being so connected to a big, powerful bomb cyclone that hit the East Coast here last night. So it kind of bombed my sleep, but interesting to reflect back on how connected to the weather and nature that we are through that.
I love that. Yeah. How about you, Bert? What inner thread is popping?
Yeah, the inner thread coming forward for me, especially as we're opening the conversation around pain and suffering, is for me the need to slow down.
Yeah.
And how when I don't slow down, when I don't take the rest that I need, I experience a lot more pain and a lot more suffering. And it feels very counterintuitive to me. It feels like I have to keep going. I have to keep producing. I have to, do whatever the task is, or the world's going to fall apart. Something impossible is going to happen and I'm going to lose all the threads. And so really it's reminding myself, no, I need to slow down. And Jessica, the winter storm hit us as well, and we're iced in today. Can't leave the house. My husband couldn't drive to work, and what a reminder from Mother Nature: slow down. You don't always get to choose what the external environment looks like, but you can choose how you begin to relate to it. And that's the thread that I'm trying to remember and hold on to and bring forward here as we have this conversation. What about you, Courtney?
Yes, I have also been anticipating recording this episode about suffering and what causes suffering. And one of the inner threads that has been really popping for me over the weekend is, I guess, to put it most succinctly, control. And how what I expect the world to be or what I expect other people to be really has nothing to do with reality. Like, so even this morning I had like a couple specific meetings scheduled. Both of them got canceled, kind of craziness at home, getting folks out the door, that kind of thing. And realizing like the upset that was bringing me. And realizing like, wait a second, who do you think is in charge here? Because it's not you, Courtney, like, please. And so getting those reminders over the past couple days and kind of being in touch with a different flavor of suffering, which has to do with how I think it should be and how it is.
Courtney, I'm interested in your thoughts on why this is where we're starting. Why suffering for inner threads?
Yeah, to be completely transparent, we've recorded a couple podcast episodes and we've had some conversations, but as we did that, I felt like I wanted to start, at least for us to have the opportunity to back up to say, why are we even doing this in the first place? For the sake of what are we even doing this podcast? What are we hoping to achieve? And for me, that comes back to acknowledging, well, I'm doing this podcast and I'm in conversation with the two of you to explore ways that we can alleviate suffering in our own lives. I mean, but we had never really had the chance to talk about the suffering part or the pain part of the problem. So I was hoping that this might be an opportunity to unpack a little bit of that for the sake of helping better understand our pain and suffering, allowing me to learn from both Jessica and Bert about their thoughts on pain and suffering, and hoping our listeners can understand a little bit more about themselves. And it offers a platform we can kind of jump into future episodes. That this is, at least for me, this is one of the reasons that I want to do this podcast is I want to talk about how we alleviate pain and suffering in our own lives through so many different avenues.
I'm so glad that you asked us to pause here and and have this conversation, because I do feel like in the world we live in, we recognize there's a whole lot of pain around us. There's a whole lot of suffering, a whole lot of horrible things happening, and we tend to brush it aside or pretend like it's not there. Maybe that's a coping mechanism, right? Or how do we get through the day? Um, Often I find humans, when we're uncomfortable, we try to make ourselves comfortable again rather than trying to understand what the discomfort's trying to show us, or where it's coming from. And to be able to relieve our suffering, Courtney, as you so aptly put, I think we have to understand what our suffering is and what is creating it and how we're relating to it. And these are the conversations that we're going to have. So I'm so excited. Thank you, Courtney.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like there's this idea too of taking on other people's suffering that is also really common, like how people see other groups or other people or other, cultures suffering and feeling like they need to be the ones responsible to fix it or to take it on, or that feeling of like, well, I have to suffer because they're suffering. And, I think that's a part of this that can also lead to feeling a little isolated. And, I hope that through our conversations here, and especially I love this way that we did come back around to this, because it is kind of understanding that our shared humanity is to suffer. Like we all experience pain. Like you were saying, but we all experience discomfort, and that it's normal, and just to normalize it and start to talk about it from ways that we can all support each other. And yeah, I love our shared intention to support each other here and
Y-
others, everyone that's going to listen to this, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think another flavor of that pain and suffering that comes through for me that's a little bit different than what the two of you expressed was um, being overwhelmed and feeling um, helpless, hopeless, feeling resigned. There's nothing, I'm so overwhelmed by the pain in this world. There's nothing I can do to change it.
Uh-huh.
And I hope that out of this conversation, there's some new cracks and avenues that folks can start to see that maybe maybe that's not true.
Mhm.
So I guess to kick it off, when we're talking about pain and suffering, what do we actually mean there? And maybe where do you see suffering right now, personally or collectively? So when we're diving into this, what is pain and suffering, and where are each of you seeing that personally or collectively?
When I think about how I define pain and suffering, I try to think about it in terms of basic discomfort. So whether it's emotional discomfort, overwhelm, or overstimulation, or sadness, or those that type of pain. There's also the discomfort of being in a room that's too warm and you're sweating and you're uncomfortable and you're feeling your attention span starting to drift, or you might be getting angry. That's a form of discomfort. I think when we're hungry, that's a form of discomfort. And so when we talk about pain and suffering, that's how I'm holding it, whether it's friction in a relationship or friction at a mental level or an emotional level or physically. And where I'm seeing it is everywhere in my own life, either where I'm feeling like I'm behind in on a project that I want to get finished, or whether I'm looking at a rural community where there's not a whole lot of economic activity that's happening. I see it in the political actions that are happening in our own country and in other countries across the globe, whether in the Middle East or in Russia and Ukraine. And um, Jessica, you put it as part of the collective human experience, and I think that is so helpful in understanding and framing that it's not personal necessarily, that it's something we all experience. It's common to all of us, and it's something we will experience in physical bodies as we move through the world, whether it's aches and pains from working out or from gardening or from getting old. They are an aspect of life. And so when we try to separate ourselves or distance ourselves from pain and suffering, ignore it, pretend like it's not there, take a pill to make it go away rather than understanding what's generating it and how we're relating to it, it just, in my mind, continues to expand and deepen the pain and the suffering rather than free us from it. So that's why I care about it, why I am a practitioner of healing arts, or however we want to frame those labels for ourselves. It's because I have seen the power of being able to acknowledge, name, and shift my own individual suffering. And I've seen others be able to do it as well. But it requires us to look at it head on, take responsibility for it, name it, normalize it, not be ashamed of it, not have it be something we have to hide or hide from, and allow it to become that normal human experience that it is, so that we can begin to transmute it and learn from it and shift it.
Yeah.
Amazing, Bert. Boom. That was that was brilliant. Yeah, I mean, I just agree with everything you said, and there's this idea that I follow that I truly believe, and I tell all my clients, there are no new problems. Like, every emotion, every feeling that every single individual has gone through, other humans in the world have gone through that. So it's just takes away from that feeling that I think a lot of people can get into of like, I'm the only one that's experienced this. Like, I'm alone. Am I normal? Right. So to your point, Bert, of like normalizing it all. And, I have this person that I enjoy listening to, and she's in the body world of like, fitness, like moderation is where you want to be, but it's not sexy. So it's like we want to just don't be on the extremes. And I kind of feel like, yeah, we all have problems. It's not sexy. But we all have these things that we experience as human, and it's just part of our human condition to be that. And it's hard when our human desire is also to be out of discomfort. And I kind of like to separate pain and suffering a little bit, because you can experience pain and not suffer from it. And have a feeling, my belief is that when we get attached to something, a thought or a belief or even a pain, that's what can create the suffering, that we really want it to be a certain way, or we wished it was a different way, or, oh, I wish that my parents didn't get divorced, otherwise my life would be different. So we develop these ways of trying to avoid looking at things, or we get really attached to these things. And a lot of us have our Buddhist background, and that's how I love to frame things for people, just bringing in Buddhism as a philosophy, as a paradigm to look at, is that it's just it normalizes it, and that these are the reasons why, and there's ways out of it. And to see now the amount, like you were saying, Bert, of suffering that's happening individually within people, and then how that's related to the collective. And it's really hard to hold the amount of pain and suffering that we're witnessing, because you can see pain in people. You can actually witness it through the news and through listening to other people that are going through things, and and the suffering that gets radiated out from that is hard to hold. It's hard to see how it's just all over and rampant. But yeah, we're not alone. Everybody's going through it.
Yeah, I would also add, for me, we live in a culture that has a fix for every pain, right? For sale. And also a culture that causes a lot of pain, right? You shouldn't look that way. You shouldn't be that way. You could be better, faster, stronger, cuter, whatever that is. And we have it for sale for you right here. So we really have like underdeveloped tools to just be with the pain or the feeling or the sadness or the emotion. And we really have overdeveloped opportunity to kind of reach for something that promises to remove that pain. I think that that happens so quickly for us in this modern day. And I think one of the things that is incredibly upsetting about the present moment is there's kind of the issues that are coming up and the problems that are coming up and the situations that are coming up globally. There is no thing you can buy to solve that. Okay, so now where are we? Because we don't have any developed understanding of, well, where do you go, right? With these problems that are so big and so massive, and there's not a fix, and we don't know how to sit with that pain or suffering or discomfort or whatever the feeling is under it. We're really in a culture that likes to kind of numb, move quickly, sell a solution, disconnect you from your own experience, even when that experience is pain or suffering.
Courtney, I think one of the things that really stands out to me is how we are, as a society, the way you're describing this, we are taking the pill, we are doing the quick fix, but we're not addressing the underlying cause. And so it persists, right? And that's what I hear you saying
Yeah, that's right.
at a major level there. And a book that's coming to mind is The Myth of Normal by Dr. Gabor Mate, which is about this idea of normalized trauma creating um, autoimmune disease in the body, and not and the medical field's approach to trying to understand these conditions in the body that don't have any physical, mechanical, or environmental cause that can be discerned. And it turns out that it's this internalized trauma that we as a society just have in us, right? I mean, school shootings or war or car bombings or whatever the horrific thing is that we hear about constantly, we've accepted as normal.
Yeah.
And that kind of, then when we think about the effect that it has on us, what's wrong with me if I'm feeling so upset by this thing, right? It goes back to that normalization of the trauma. So
It's huge. Yeah, that's huge. And another piece I think that when we talk about kind of pain and suffering, there is pain, right? Like you stub your toe, you break your arm, it hurts. Like that is painful. Your parents tell you they're going to get divorced. That moment is really painful. Those moments. But the suffering, for me anyway, is aligned with more of a the 3 a.m. wake up when you're regretting what you said at a meeting, trying to understand what it's going to mean that your parents are getting divorced and how terrible life is going to be when you don't really know, projecting terrible outcomes, taking on other people's pain when you really don't know. It may not be, that might not be the most healthy thing to do. And again, when we're shown so many images and so many news updates and so many images and stories about all the pain in the world, that can cause a lot of suffering. Um, you know, because we're all, as humans, I think we're kind of naturally compassionate, and we see those things and it hurts to see others in pain. But is there a distinction you would make between pain and suffering, Jessica or Bert?
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a great point. Like, right, we stub our toes, we burn our hands on hot coffee, like, we experience pain. And I think about, I choose to go do hard mountain climbing things, and it's painful. It's painful. And at times I feel like I'm suffering, right? Like, but I realize I'm kind of doing it to myself. But then there's this reward that comes from moving through it. So I think pain is this temporary thing that if you can move through it, you will get to the other side of it. And I think our physical bodies always want to have that homeostasis, that equilibrium. It's always trying to kind of find its path to normalcy. And when things persist, when we can say that's kind of suffering, when things kind of stay around, yeah, it's then we look for the quick fixes to get out of it as quickly as possible. And whether that's finding the pill for a chronic pain or numbing an emotional pain with food or, any other kind of addictive kind of process with alcohol or drugs or shopping, there's a lot of ways that we try to avoid the suffering part of the pain. But I don't know, I always kind of feel like pain can be a short-term thing, and it should be a short-term thing that we can learn from. Our bodies experience it. It's an alarm system for us to say, "Hey, something's off kilter here. Look at me, look at me, look at me." And it's that choice point of do we tend to it, or are we going to suppress it and numb it and try to make it go away as fast as possible because it's uncomfortable? But I'd be curious what your thoughts are, Bert. What do you think?
Yeah, I love earlier, Jessica, when you were talking about you can have pain and not necessarily suffer from it. That kind of blew me wide open a little bit. I love that so much. And so as my brain is kind of trying to tick through different ways of holding this and understanding this, where I'm landing is pain is the experience and suffering is how we relate to it.
Yeah.
And they seem often inextricably intertwined, but they don't have to be. And I think that really gets back to what you both have been saying about our parents getting divorced, and it might be for the individual an awful moment when they tell you that it's happening, but when you're 40 and still in pain from that moment, that's the suffering, the way you're relating to the event or the experience. But it doesn't have to be the suffering, right? We can relate to it differently. That's the agency, that's the power. That's the Buddhist philosophy piece about how we create our own suffering. And in that same vein, we can relieve our own suffering.
Courtney, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that nails it a lot of times instead of having the direct experience of the pain, as a signal or as something we're consciously choosing to grow, like, great example, the hikes, you're choosing to do that. Instead of relating directly to the pain, we have, like, a secondary relationship to it that causes the suffering. Um, I'm not just sad, I'm sad about being sad. I'm not just hurt, I'm hurt about how hurt I am. You know what I mean? Like, we have secondary these ways that we relate that aren't a direct experience. Okay, the pain is here. What do I need to address the pain? Even if it's just feeling that moment, addressing your body, addressing your spirit, addressing yourself to help better understand and hold that pain. Instead, we want to like distance, and then it's kind of goes into suffering mode. I think that's a great way to put it. Suffering is kind of the relationship that we have with the pain. And all of that happens so fast. It's not like a conscious decision where you're kind of choosing how you're going to relate to the pain, but it's usually something that is a pattern that um, you've done for a long time, right?
Yeah, it's making me think, Bert, of your thread of slowing down, right? Wouldn't it be incredible if we could slow that down? Become more aware of when pain trickles into suffering. I think that would be such a gift. But like, what do you think happens if we get unconscious about pain? How does that turn into suffering? I mean, is that what you were pointing to, Courtney? Like these patterns? When we experience some sort of pain, is it linked to an old pattern that gets us pulled into suffering unconsciously if we can't bring awareness to it?
Yeah, when we're unconscious, we often are in suffering, right? Because we're not really looking and examining directly at what's happening. We have an experience and immediately are unconscious, either numbing, distancing, judging, um, ignoring, all of those kind of responses to pain. Then we kind of go into unconscious zone, and then, my God, there's a buffet of how we suffer and continue to suffer and kind of pile it on, right? And then that becomes normal, and so our life, it's very normal to feel, to live in that kind of suffering place. That's what life is. Life is hard. It's, this is how it is. You don't understand what my background. You don't understand what it's like. And so we almost like make a little nest of our suffering and kind of get pretty comfortable in an experience of just suffering and continuing to kind of nurture that suffering instead of which what the podcast is about, instead of exploring a path of healing, possibility, acknowledging and moving forward, repairing any of these types of things that will get us, out of that suffering.
I think unconsciousness allows us the excuse to remain in the state that we're in. Courtney, as you're talking, a question that comes to mind for me is, why don't more people pursue the healing path? Why do people choose? I see it as a choice. Once you're aware of it, it's a choice. And I see a lot of people who choose to keep their heads buried in the sand, to ignore what their reality is, so they don't have to deal with it. Um, and I think it's hard for people to look at their suffering, to look at their pain, to look at their patterns and take responsibility for them.
I think that you're right, but I just want to acknowledge that for a lot of people, it's more important to have things stay the same. It sucks, but I know it. It's painful, but I know it. Instead of taking the chance of unpacking that, because it could get worse, and often does get worse for a moment or two, right? So to me, it makes a lot of sense that people want to avoid healing or avoid changing because it's bad, but it's the bad that they're used to.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense why people wouldn't want to heal, right? And when you add on the layers of patterns of not wanting people to see certain aspects of you, right? Keeping yourself hidden, masking in particular ways, that when we take responsibility for our experience, we have to own some of those things. And people do see some of those parts of ourselves or sides of ourselves that we might not be particularly comfortable with. And that's scary. That's really vulnerable to step into and do. Something that comes to mind here for me is also the concept of convenience. And we look at convenience stores. They cost more almost always. The items you find there are almost always lower quality. If you're talking food, certainly it's not serving your highest good or nutrition to buy some food there. And I begin to see at least how this idea of convenience as a savior, as something to save us time, to help us out, is actually slowly killing us and keeping us trapped in this prison of comfort that keeping it staying the same, Courtney, as you say, right? It's easy to do.
Oh my gosh, I love the convenience store metaphor. It's so true. Fast in the short run, painful in the long run, Yeah.
Exactly. And I love what you were saying, Courtney, about the nest of suffering. I mean, it reminds me of a client that I just saw recently who's becoming aware. It's amazing to witness this person like becoming conscious to a pattern, and this person sat down and was very overwhelmed because it was like, where do I start? I have all these things that I see are connected. It feels like a big tangle. I don't know if it's my marriage. I don't know if it's my job. I don't know if it's my mother. Like, where do I start? And I think a lot of people just don't choose the healing path because it might be overwhelming to know where to start. And I love our inner threads, because I feel like how I kind of perceive things like this nest of suffering is this ball of yarn all knotted up, and like just pull on a thread and see where that goes. It's like a a knot in your shoelace. If you start to just kind of loosen it, all of a sudden it opens up and it doesn't become so overwhelming, or it gets easier to identify where these strings are attached. So I think a lot of people just get overwhelmed with, how do I even do this?
So recently I've gotten back into knitting, and I've been knitting more and more, and I've gotten into knitting more complex projects, right? So as I'm knitting more complex projects, I notice this pattern that I've had to break through, where I get to a part of the pattern that I don't understand or I don't know how to do, and I just get really frustrated and overwhelmed, and immediately my brain is like, this is going to suck. I don't know how to do this. I don't know why I picked this project. It's too hard. I can't figure it out, like crazy, so fast. And so I'm practicing, okay, slow down. Let's look at the pattern. Let's find a YouTube video. You're going to have to take some stitches out. You might have to back up a few steps, like stepping it down and then being like, okay, now we're at a place where we can start again and try again, do it over. And, that is so new for me because the trigger of that overwhelm is so fast. And I think for a lot of people in that suffering moment, you know, the word gets said, the conversation gets brought up, the response at work isn't what you expected, and it just triggers all of this emotion and meaning that's not necessarily there. And if it really requires that you take a beat and say like, okay, I need to slow down. I need to find some help. I need to back up. I need to, stop that automatic flood of assumptions that kind of lead you down the well-worn path to suffering again. I'd be curious, either of you, Jessica, you may know the words, like what are those four what the Buddhists put it in such a succinct way, like,
Yeah, the Four Noble Truths. Yeah, I mean, it's like one of those where it's so simple, but yet so profound and deep. So the first one is, to be human is to suffer. And this is how I understand it, first of all. So I'm just putting it out there, my paraphrasing. So the first noble truth is, to be human is to suffer. And the second noble truth is, uh, the suffering is because of our attachments, our aversions, and our misknowings or misunderstandings or misbeliefs we have about ourselves and the world. And the third noble truth is that there's a way out. There's hope. There's a way, something you can do. And the fourth noble truth is to follow the Eightfold Path, which is just a higher consciousness level of living life. You're speaking correctly. You're not gossiping. You're living through making your living, doing, ethical work. There's just different paths to take that lead you onto this kind of path of higher consciousness. But I really love even the first three. Just it's back to that normalizing everything and that there's a way out. There is a way out. There is a path forward if you want to take responsibility for looking at those things and moving forward with it.
to bring that up because I think in so many ways that's core to a lot of the conversations that we have and a lot of the work that we do through Buddhism, through shamanism, through these pathways that we're not inventing here, but this is information and ways of conveying wisdom from, lots of different traditions and experiences. But I love the way that Buddhists can put that so succinctly. And each of those Four Noble Truths can be unpacked and discussed and has been written about and what have you. But, that's like a little pocket-sized reminder. We suffer. Here's reasons why it's avoidable. When you said the Eightfold Path, the thing that immediately came to mind was like the Eightfold Path is the exact opposite of the convenience store that Bert was talking about, right? It's the exact opposite of fast and easy. It gets easier, but there's some integrity in unpacking and kind of getting really honest with yourself on that in that Eightfold Path.
One of the things that particularly strikes me about the Eightfold Path is that it shows you how your actions, your thoughts, your words, your relationships, the way you are in the world create your suffering. It's not a, if you do this thing or don't do this thing, you're going to be punished, right? That's not the message, at least as I understand it here. And so, I just really like how it's freeing in that way. When we look at Buddhist psychology or Buddhist philosophy, separate from religion or dogma, you begin to see how it's not about don't do this or do this. It's about this is how you are in the world. And when you are this way in the world, you experience less suffering. And wow, that's absolutely a path that I want to be on for those reasons.
It's not make sure you're married to the right person, make sure you went to the right school, make sure you have this kind of a prestigious this or prestigious that. It's really completely starts with you and ends with you, which is nice.
Yeah, and it's not to like, punish yourself for, oh, I got angry and upset at somebody. Oh, there I go again, being that person that has an anger problem, right? I think it can be people can kind of take that and um, possibly get into the shame spiral with it and blame themselves for things. It's really, I mean, at the heart of Buddhism too is compassion. It's looking at like, yeah, we all suffer. We've all been through these really challenging things being human. And can you hold yourself in compassion as you enter into this path of living life from a more introspective, taking responsibility, from showing yourself some compassion and love along the way.
Which is more challenging than it sounds, that sounds like, "Oh, yeah, I can do that, no prob." It's actually, it can be more challenging than it sounds. So that's a little bit about the Buddhist's perspective and some potential ways that we move out of suffering or how they acknowledge suffering. The other part of our practices are shamanic practices. And I'm curious if each of you have an opinion or experience with how shamanic work approaches pain and the perspective from that direction.
Yeah, I think as Jessica named the attachment, the aversion, and the misknowing within Buddhism, you have within shamanism this idea of soul loss, power loss, and a disrupted energy system. Energetic interference is a term that's used there. And really, I hold those for purposes of this conversation in symbol and metaphor, um, in that when we experience traumas or painful events in our lives, the being that we are, the energy that we are, can get disrupted or altered or rent or changed in some way. And when an example that I'll often use when I'm trying to describe this to someone that this is new is if you can imagine your soul body or your energy body as a breakable vessel, and a trauma is something that breaks that vessel. It chips a piece off of it. And when we move through life, losing all of these pieces of the vessel that holds our life force energy, then we end up losing that life force energy and feeling tired and fatigued and lost and depressed and any other number of experiences. The power then, our life force energy, is held within that vessel. And that's really the relationship between power loss and soul loss, as I understand it. We experience some great event, we lose a piece of ourselves. It feels so painful that we don't want to look at it. We don't want to go back there. We don't want to ever think about it again. And in doing so, we are separating ourselves from ourself, from that part of ourselves that experienced such great pain in that moment. And so the remedy then is to find that peace, understand what it needs to heal, and bringing it back into that soul body to integrate into the whole being. And so that's a little bit of talking and understanding, there's a whole big world of work behind all of this, but the shorthand in my understanding is soul loss, power loss, and energetic interference, and how we can recognize those and address those can help us understand how we're relating to our experience and should begin to shift that relationship to the suffering that we're experiencing.
I explain it pretty similar. It's funny, I always use the metaphor of a potted plant. So it's the same kind of thing. Like the plant will still grow, you will still grow, but you might be missing some fertilizer / power. You might be missing part of your container / soul parts. So it's, that idea that we can continue living, yes, but are we fully complete and full of our own life force that gives us that vibrancy to our life. And how that loss of our own life force power can leave us susceptible to chronic diseases and pain and suffering. It's just kind of that, I think that idea that you were touching on a little bit about the Myth of Normal book, where if you have experiences of trauma or, growing up with sick parents or an verbally abusive sibling, like these are things that just drain you of your life force. And then you can start to feel like, oh, well, it's just normal. It was just normal for me to, all my friends, you know, got their dads spanked them. So that's normal. But right then everyone's growing up in this power loss state. Shamanism is really helpful in bringing back your own sources of power so that you do feel like you can move through the world with all those really beautiful qualities that I think we touched on with the Buddhism stuff. Can you have compassion? And that's kind of how they, I think, start to weave together. Courtney, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess there would be two things that I would add. One thing that the word shamanism may bring up ideas for listeners, right? They may have an idea of what that word is or means or contains, but shamanism really is something that has existed across cultures, across time. And when we talk about soul loss, power loss, energetic interference, all these ways that people are harmed in our culture today, we are in a culture that has no shamanism. In fact, the culture is set up to create power loss, soul loss, energetic interference. And I bring that point up because this can sound so exotic or foreign or what shamanism is that have to do with like Indians? The word is really kind of misunderstood. And because we live in a culture that has no parallel to that. Our culture actively separates from ourselves. Our culture actively separates us from nature. We're recording in the United States of America, but in this culture specifically, there's a lot of hierarchy and who can do what and who can do what when, and racism, sexism, misogyny, all kinds of ways that the culture is designed to create power loss, soul loss, what have you. And we don't have doctors for that, right? You can go to the doctor if you have a headache. You can go to the doctor if you break a bone. It's harder to go to a doctor when you've experienced soul loss. Therapy, therapists, some of that work can certainly touch on that and help. But I think that there's a specific dimensionality that shamanism brings forward that isn't something that's normally experienced by folks day to day in modern life and modern American life. And I think that's on purpose.
I think another good point that you're making here, Courtney, is the vocabulary we're using may sound new or different. And we all have experiences of this in our everyday lives. If you've ever walked into a room and you can immediately tell, ooh, something's off, like someone just had a fight. You weren't there for it, you didn't hear it, but you know something is off. That's energy. Those are power dynamics. When people are in relationship and one person is putting another person down in order to uplift themselves, those are power dynamics. Those are ways that we're trying to steal power or give up our power in relationship. And it happens every day, whether or not we're using this language. And I think another layer here that's important to address is when we talk about shamanism, there are forms of lineage lines and teachings that are culturally specific. And at least when I'm talking about shamanism, I'm not talking about those culturally specific practices. What we're talking about are when you look at the shamanic cultures worldwide who have similar concepts, they might not call it soul loss or power loss or energetic interference, but you find those concepts there. They're common to all humans. And that's what makes it available to us to be able to work with. And I think the great value it brings for us to be able to work with shamanism to be able to relieve ourselves from suffering.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we're going here because there is so many misunderstandings about shamanism, and it does kind of bring up a lot of maybe preconceived notions or ideas of what it is. This started, and they were verbal, traditions, oral traditions that were handed down, and were following humans as they moved across the land and across the land bridge into the Americas, and there's so many similarities between how soul retrieval is done in South America to the kind of Celtic versions to the Far East, and there's similarities, and that's what we're trained in, is kind of the understanding of what is the basic understanding of what soul loss is and how it occurs and how you can bring those parts back to you.
No, that's amazing. I think thank you both for unpacking that further. And I think that it's incredibly important in our future episodes as we talk about Buddhism, shamanism, kind of using new vocabulary and new words, acknowledging people may have understandings of those words, and there's limitations to words sometimes. I love this conversation about Buddhism and shamanism, and these are topics we're going to unpack as we kind of get into further episodes. So I think when we talk about Buddhism, shamanism, the pain and suffering in our world and how all that comes together, that's hopefully what we'll unpack in future episodes. Bert, can you give us an overview of why these two topics, shamanism and Buddhism?
I think it's really important to note that this intersection of shamanism and Buddhism isn't typical. We share a common education through the foundation of the Sacred Stream, which is a school for consciousness studies in Berkeley, California. And what I find so incredible about the way these bodies of work are taught is how they support and complement each other. And so Buddhism essentially offers the ethical component to shamanism. And shamanism, primarily in the way that we're talking about it here, we're looking at it as a healing modality. There are many other aspects of it that we may not ever look at. But the point being that the Buddhism offers the compassion and the ethics to allow shamanism to be such an effective tool for healing in our world. And we each have this common education, but we apply it so differently in our individual practices. That's something else that really interests me here, is that the information is shared, but the application is so different. And that's what I find so much value out of having these conversations.
I love that. Thanks for giving a little insight into our shared background. So I guess I have two last questions. One, I'd love to hear what each of you hope to achieve with the podcast. Like, what's your why specifically in recording these? And we get together every couple weeks and put out an episode. I'd love to hear your intention in doing that.
Oh, I love that, Courtney. I mean, I keep coming back to my intention being to normalize the suffering that is inherent in being human, and the holding the light for people as they explore their shadows, and knowing that we are here, we've all trained together with the same body of work, like you were explaining, Bert. And I know I'll just speak for myself, but the amount of transformation that I have gained personally through this exact work that we'll kind of be sharing anecdotally through different themes and topics, but that's all pointing to there are ways out. There are ways out, and just to hold people in hope and light and love that, yeah, but not in a bypassing way, right? We're going to get through this, and we're going to help you hopefully start to be able to pull on some of your own threads of your inner crunchy, knotted, nesty patterns that maybe you're ready to let go of. And that I'm hoping that we can just support everybody through their own inner exploration.
It's beautiful. That's beautiful. What about you, Bert?
My why. Every day when I set my altar, I set my intention to serve the highest good of all beings as a beacon of light and compassion. And this feels like a direct conduit to that work. Jessica, similarly to what you were saying, this work saved my life, and what it revealed to me was the possibility and the huge impact that can happen in such a relatively short amount of time. And why wouldn't people want that for themselves, to relieve their own suffering? And so if we can be examples that inspire or share or teach or walk alongside or normalize for others, then that's exactly where I want to be. And I couldn't imagine doing it with anyone else.
I love that. Yeah, for me, in my coaching work day to day, I talk about I'm a coach because I want to help people stop crying in the bathroom at work. And, that's a very practical, kind of funny explanation for what I do. But truly, I want all beings to be free, and as I've been able to find my own liberation and freedom through this work, I want to help other people do the same because there's so much unnecessary suffering. And when we think that that's just the way it has to be or whatever, I really I hope people can step back and get a bigger perspective of what might be going on and give them more choice and freedom in their own lives. So I hope that if we can accomplish any piece of that in the podcast, that would be a really exciting achievement in my mind. And final question for today. What is bringing you joy today? So much talk about suffering, pain, the aspects of suffering and pain. What's bringing you joy recently?
Love this question. I love that we end it with this question, right? Because yeah, there's pain, suffering, and there's joy. um, I got to go out on a hike for the first time all winter, like since for months at this point, because it's been really icy and really cold. And last weekend, it had thawed enough that the ice had turned to slush, and I got to be outside in nature, and felt like a freed animal. It was a really interesting feeling, and I realized I hadn't been outside like that in a long time in nature. I've gone for walks in my neighborhood, but just being out on a hiking trail and seeing all the little animals coming around and, finding their little hidden treats that they've been tucked away underneath all the snow and hearing the birds. And gave me a lot of hope and joy and just to be back outside and connecting with nature. It was very simple. My joy was very simple this time.
Oh, I love that. I love those moments of being outside after a long time being stuck inside someplace. Bert, what about you? What's bringing you joy these days?
I just spent a couple of days supporting class at the Sacred Stream, the Integrated Energy Medicine Immersion class. And it is working with light and sound and rays of color. And it's just such a joyous field to be in and to be able to support. And so I'm still feeling kind of sparkling almost from fizzing from that work. It was a beautiful light show. And what an incredible reminder of how we can bring those techniques and tools forward into our lived experience. It doesn't have to just be when you're in class, it can be bringing the magic forward in your everyday experience. And that's just bringing me so much joy right now.
For me, I got a inoculated mushroom log for Valentine's Day. And I've been and I've been you've got to mist it. It's about the size of like a yoga block, like a shoebox, this particular kit. And you've got to mist it 3 or 4 times a day. And so we've been misting and looking and is anything going to happen? I don't know. Is this one broken? We don't know, blah blah blah. And then all of a sudden, bloop, these little teeny pink mushrooms started sprouting up. And now literally every time I go in to my house to look at it, it seems like it's grown from the last time. So they're pink oyster mushrooms and they're just absolutely gorgeous and magical. And my whole family's obsessed with these mushrooms just growing so quickly and they're a spectacular color. It's just every time I run into mist my mushrooms, I'm just filled with happiness and mystery and joy. So that's what's bringing me a lot of joy these days. I love hearing what's bringing everyone joy. And As always, love having these conversations with you all.
I'm just so excited to carry on with more and more wisdom that's being shared from our combined inner threads. And so join us next week when we talk about our own personal paths to healing, kind of our journeys, our individual journeys of how we got onto this path of healing and supporting people in our communities and in our clients and hopefully in the greater world around us.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to check our show notes for links and resources from today's episode. And if you enjoyed this episode of Inner Threads, consider sharing it with a friend. Your ratings and reviews help others like you join the conversation. And if there's a topic or question you'd like to hear on Inner Threads, drop us a line. We love hearing from you.